How are we doing today, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the kipping ring dip. Now, if you want to dig down into shoulder mechanics and everything that we want to be going through specifically in the ring dip around just basically biomechanical sense and understanding the movement from that standpoint, go watch our strict ring dip video because we're going to be looking at the kip and how to generate force through the kip specifically here. Obviously making the ring dip easier for metcons and things like that. So I will quickly go through the basics though. So obviously we need our ring set up quite correctly. This will create a lot more stability with the kipping ring dip. Obviously the dynamic action means there is a higher demand for stability that's required. So you want your rings being set up so that your elbow and your knuckles are kind of just touching either side, and that's actually probably a fraction long for me. So I'm going to adjust it. Remember, just a little bit of a slide with the straps is the easiest way to adjust rather than trying to flick it because that's a big action. If you only need small adjustments, slide it like so, and that's spot on for me. So from there, big things that we want to be remembering with our ring dips is remembering to stack the wrist. So when you're sitting on top of that ring, make sure to get the wrist stacked directly on top of the actual ring itself. Make sure we're not sitting like this, which is very common, because that's going to flare the ring out and away from you and make it incredibly hard to actually get lockout, but also stabilize and pull in towards you. From there, we want to be making sure that we're also creating a stack with the body, and that's going to be best created by creating protraction at the top. In terms of I'm going to protract and sit forwards and then hollow out and through the midline to be able to stay long as I come down into that rep. As I come down into the movement itself, remember, elbows initiate. You stack down the bottom. You're going to be thinking about retracting the shoulder blades and pulling the shoulder blades backwards towards the spine as you come down to the bottom position, because that's going to allow you to create space in the shoulder, but also lengthen out the pec and the tricep correctly to be able to create a contraction to actually press out of. Same thing when we come up, you're thinking about elbow initiation and you're driving through the top. Now, obviously, the hollow is going to change as you move through the actual rep itself because we're going to be using our legs to generate force. However, finishing up in the hollow is still a good habit. But again, less important because we're going to be thinking more about creating the dynamic movement with the legs and the midline. So, first things that you want to be thinking about when you're doing your kipping ring dips is being strong at the top and the bottom position. The top and the bottom need to be strong mainly because you need to be able to stabilize the dynamic action that you're going to be going through as you're doing the movement. The top hold, we want to be thinking about exactly everything that I just said. So set yourself, make sure your wrists are stacked early. So I'm deliberately stacking them up here. Don't grab on here and then jump up because that's just going to set your wrist up to be in that position that we spoke about earlier. So stack the wrists on top. From there, set yourself in the middle, jump nice and high and press immediately. And then at the top, you're trying to think about bringing your knuckles to your thighs. You're trying to think about pressing your shoulders down and away from the ears. And you're thinking about protraction, so the shoulder sitting forwards and hollowing. That way you can get strong in that shape. So as I drive up, I'm stacked, knuckles are in against my side, I'm hollowed, shoulders are away from ears, and I'm protracted. That's your top hold shape. From there, we want to be thinking about our bottom hold. Now, bottom hold is important for the kipping ring dip, particularly because quite often where people struggle when they're learning it is that they try and come down and they try and kip while their body is still either moving down or they start trying to press and then kipping with their legs. Both of these things are going to make it harder to actually get a successful rep, but it's also going to destabilize the action itself, and you're less likely to actually be able to move your legs quickly because you're still doing another movement. You're better off coming down, stopping, doing your kip action, and then pressing. And that's going to make it significantly easier, more stable, easier to control, etc. So what we want to be thinking about with the bottom hold is learning how to get down to a stable position and being comfortable down there. So bottom hold, because the rules state that bicep must touch the top of the ring, that's where your bottom hold wants to be. Now, if you've got short forearms, it's going to be really easy for you. If you've got long forearms, it's going to be a little bit deeper and it's going to be a little bit suckier. So you want to be thinking about getting into that position comfortably, and starting at the top, lowering yourself down to it, and knowing where that stop point is to then hold. Everything else still applies. You're still thinking about tucking the knuckles into the rib cage. From there, you're thinking about retracting, pulling your shoulder blade backwards, not necessarily elevating though. We're thinking about back, not up. Because you will get a lot of people who sit and they'll sit up with their shoulder as they come down to the bottom. From there, because we're not actually kipping yet, we still want to be long, so still hold your hollow hold, and keeping the wrists stacked over the top of the rings. So we'll do that again. Up to the top, come down to the bottom, bicep touches the top of the ring, and that's my bottom hold. Shoulders are back, which is the main big difference. So, being able to come down to that bottom hold, being comfortable there before being able to move into the kipping action is quite important. So get used to both top and bottom holds, holding both for 30 seconds plus, even up towards the minute. Just simply build capacity in those shapes. Most people find the top hold easier, bottom hold harder. By the same token, I've met some people who find the bottom easier and the top harder, so it will depend. Okay, from there, we have two main kipping actions. One is more for the kipping ring dip itself, but we'll also talk through the kipping ring dip with a back kick, which goes towards, obviously, a ring muscle up. So the action that we're looking for when we're talking about the kipping action is from the bottom, obviously upper body is just holding yourself there. I'm going to talk about the legs, is from an elongated leg position, snapping upwards, so the abdominals, the hip flexors, the hamstrings, even the toes are all going to pull up to create an upwards action to allow you to create momentum to then press yourself into lockout. So you're thinking almost like a tuck jump is probably the best way of looking at it. Of thinking about jumping here and then everything very quickly, remember it's a quick action, snapping up towards the chest to then pop yourself out. So think about that tuck jump action, and doing a couple of tuck jump sort of movements can be a useful way of just getting that sensation there, or even doing reps where you're kind of popping it with one leg off the ground can be a useful kind of way to just get sensation about feeling what that action feels like and doing it quickly. Where a lot of people go wrong is that they're either thinking about pressing too early or they move too slowly and they'll do that. There's no momentum there. If you do that slowly, you can't feel any upwards force. Whereas if I drive that leg up quickly, I can feel my body lift up slightly, even with just one leg. So creating that fast action is super crucial. So have that intent there, have that drive there. If you get that, it makes it a lot easier. So that's what we're going to do for the kipping ring dip. Now, big secondary thing on top of this is, and this is where the first drill comes in, is don't kick back down. Other mistake that a lot of people make is that they kick up and they have to create that momentum and they're starting to press, but while they're still pressing, they kick back down again and they try and straighten their legs out. Kicking down doesn't help you. It doesn't benefit the situation at all. So we don't want to be kicking down because all that's going to do is counteract the action that you just did to pop up. And typically people kick down harder than what they do when they pull up, which means you're actually making it harder again, which is why you'll get people who'll kip and they'll pop up and then they'll struggle to lock out because they've kicked back down again. They've stopped their momentum. So first drill is pop the legs up and leave them up until you are fully locked out. Then you can lengthen your legs out. Just to get used to that sensation and make sure that there's no actual, no momentum traveling down. So if I jump up, from there I'm going to come down to the bottom, going to pop and drive. Pop and drive. And I'll lift my knees up deliberately to actually create that sensation of upwards motion without any sort of lengthening phase or driving down. So this means that we can very easily get that sensation of that vertical drive. So that's our first drill. If you struggle getting that, what can be another useful way of training this is doing a single leg variation with a little bit of leg assistance. So obviously using some plates or something like that, where you can sit down the bottom of your rep, and then just simply get used to popping up and jumping at the same time. So that can be another way, useful way to kind of learn it and get sensation. Obviously, doing it on both sides, just to kind of get that feeling there, get that idea there. Okay, so those are our drills. Our next set is obviously doing it fully properly. Now you'll notice that my legs will straighten, but you should notice my feet don't go down. When I straighten, I pop up, and my feet actually almost hover in midair. And as my upper body lengthens, my legs just lengthen as well, which means that there's just less energy and allows it to be quicker to complete the action itself. So what I'm saying is legs will lengthen, but you don't kick down. And that's the important side of it. So if I go again, up, down to bottom, pop, pop, to create your position. Okay, so that's a normal ring dip. Second style is the butt kick ring dip, which is what you'll see or the back kick, which is what you'll see when people do ring muscle ups. Now, this one is probably you're not going to really use this from an efficiency standpoint if you're doing just ring dips, simply because it's not as fast, it's not as efficient, it's a skill drill more than anything else. Having said that, you can, if you get really good at it, you can kind of get like a butterfly action going, which can be sort of effective for ring muscle ups, but again, still kind of a little bit slow in comparison to just vertically traveling up and down. So, what we're going to be looking for here, the only thing that changes is rather than the legs being hollowed out and popping up, the legs are actually going to deliberately start out in front of you. From there, they're going to swing back. From there, kick up towards the glutes. So it's literally a backwards kick. And that's the same action that your legs will travel through in a ring muscle up, as you catch to then dip out of it. So what we want to be doing is just literally mimicking the ring dip out of the muscle up action itself, which is obviously really, really useful for when you're learning to string both the catch or the up phase and the pull, as well as the press of the ring muscle up. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to jump out, I'm going to go to my bottom position, legs are going to go out in front. From there, pull back, butt kick, and you should feel the upwards momentum. From there, down, and up. So, as you saw there, as I pressed, I was in more of an arched position, which is the natural position you'll get to as you come up to in the top of a muscle up, to then drop the rib cage backwards and move from there. Now, important thing to recognize there is that top position and that backwards kick action does put the rib cage and the shoulder blades into a different position. It's not the ideal position to ring dip from. So in terms of learning ring dips and coordinating this with your strict ring dips, you're better off with the vertical shape. However, the backwards kick action, by moving the rib cage forwards like that, allows you to move the ribs backwards, which actually fits really nicely into the ring muscle up and stringing them together. So both positions are good, but in their own specific ways, in the context of their own specific movements. So pick the correct kipping action or the correct action that you need to learn that's in the context of your skill. And don't just favor one simply because it's what you prefer. You do want to be able to learn both. So that's our kipping ring dip. Hope you guys enjoyed that.